I'm really excited about this particular session of Crealytics Inside the Black Box webinar series. This one's called Airbnb, Adidas, and eBay, How Stopping Spend Opened Doors to a Whole New Advertising Strategy. And joining us for this one is our guest, Ujjwal Dhoot, along with Andreas Reiffen. Kind of a counterintuitive topic, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun to explore this one. Some background on Ujjwal first. He's the CMO of DXL Group. It's the largest omni-channel specialty retailer for big and tall men's apparel. Ujjwal has a really unique perspective on the marketing space with a specific interest in influencing a customer journey and optimizing it as well. He's obsessed with building fast growth marketing and digitally native retail, DTC, and e-commerce organizations, and with an emphasis on continuous customer behavioral changes and increasing customer lifetime value. Obviously a perfect match for the Inside the Black Box webinar as well. Joining him today is Andreas Reiffen. Andy is the CEO and strategic leader at Crealytics. It's a multinational performance advertising agency and a technology firm. And he's a much sought after speaker in addition to being the host of this webinar. He's also a published expert on the intersection of paid advertising and measurement, particularly on the adaptation of predictive CLV into multi-channel acquisition marketing. Both these guys are strong visionaries with really strong opinions, and I am thrilled to be able to turn it over to these guys. So let's get started.
Thanks for the credits, Mark, and Ujjwal. I'm glad to have you on my webinar. Let's get started right away. Ujjwal, there was a story published a couple of weeks ago about Airbnb, and apparently during COVID they had to stop their advertising, and surprise, surprise, they realized, oh God, we've cut off like hundreds of millions of dollars of ad spend, and still we are getting kind of the same level of traffic. And that's not the only one. There's another case study about eBay, similar thing. They had someone who had doubt about the causality between clicks on ads and sales that happened, and they also stopped advertising. Same thing, same traffic, almost same traffic came in. And there are several, we have shared them in the chat box, so you can read them all if you're listening in here. So my question is, all these companies, they were quite sophisticated on the marketing side. They had advertising professionals, they had data scientists, they were tweaking their own bid models, and yet over years they did not notice that their actual return was much lower than what they were made to believe. So how could this happen? What's your take on this?
It's actually interesting because we talk about this in our marketing meetings a lot, not this specific thing, and not just in our marketing meetings, but even at the leadership level, we talk about it. And it's the concept of separating correlation from causality a little bit, where when things are good, we oftentimes, as marketers, as business people, mistake our inputs into the business as the factual reasons for driving the outcomes. And we assume we're doing ABC, and this is what's driving the outcome that we're seeing in the business. And oftentimes that's correlation. And with Airbnb, if I remember the article right, it's something like they were spending 21% of their overall revenue on marketing, and they took it down to 14% of revenue. So a pretty significant drop. And I think the important thing out here to understand in last year is that we forever changed the marketing landscape, and we also challenged our assumptions as business people like we never have. And within marketing, we challenge the assumptions of does this really work? And does this really work to the extent we I mean, think about all of us. We went from working in offices to working from home full time in a matter of weeks. With that, that's one of many disruptions that happened, but the disruption was very clear that we were challenging all the assumptions we had in what worked and what didn't work, and new times call for new ways of thinking.
So would you assume that going forward, basing your budgeting decisions will always incorporate incrementality-backed results? I mean, today we are still used to this mechanism. Someone clicks, there's a purchase happening, and then you allocate the credits from that purchase to the one or many clicks that happened previously. This is what we got used to. Incrementality testing is a different story because you set up dedicated tests and you figure out, do people actually react to this? Do you think that there's enough pressure in the market that going forward, this at some point will become the new normal?
I think, yeah, go forward, and there's 2 or 3 things out here. Go forward, what's going to become very critical is to truly understand the why in addition to answering the what. And sometimes, and I understand why marketers in prior years, and it's definitely not the most effective way to understand anymore, but I understand marketers' jobs were to give credit. They weren't to not give credit. And if your job is to give credit, you will give 100% of the credit to 100% of the channels. So in essence, there is no sale that does not get credit. But that's the attribution methodology, which I think is a bit archaic today. I don't think attribution is as impactful or nearly as impactful, or is not believed to be as impactful as it was believed to be impactful, at least in my view, anymore. And the reason is that, let's assume, Andreas, you and me and Mark and everyone, we just go on vacation. And do you think we're going to get 0 sales? I don't think so. I think we're still going to produce an outcome. I think the businesses we work for are still going to produce, whether it's 20 or 70 or 80 or 60, varying degrees, depending on how effective your marketing is, of an outcome. So why does every sale need to get a credit when some of that outcome is not even directly caused by the marketing we're running? And because of that, I think attribution is kind of dead. And we need to move to an incrementality on-off based approach to marketing. And what I mean by the on-off approach is there's so many things that change in business every day. And whether it's macroeconomic shifts like the stimulus or lockdowns like last year, to truly isolate variables and to truly isolate elements and things and actions that actually influence the customer, the only way to learn is to go from first gear to fifth gear, back to first gear, back to fifth gear. If all you're doing is changing from the third gear to fourth gear, you're not going to see material outcomes or material differences in outcomes.
What do you think is the reason that the smartest data guys who indeed certainly worked for all these companies, what's the reason they did not spot the problem? Because ultimately that's a pure numbers game, isn't it?
Yeah, I think sometimes, as I think I also said right now, is that as marketers, our job is to give credit. And it was never about a new way of thinking, but the smartest guys in the room were, and not necessarily the smartest guys, but everyone in the room was so focused on understanding how we're going to give credit to different channels that we forgot about the more strategic question to ask, where the question needs to evolve from what channel gets how much credit to what really drove the impact and how much credit should it get. So it's kind of raising the bar a little bit in the strategic thinking, where it's not about how much credit to give versus should credit be given and why.
I guess if I imagine what happened there is that we took the tracking mechanism for granted, and then data scientists were tasked to get more out of based on the assumption that all that we see is real. So we kind of all operated in that box, and it's something, in my opinion, which you still see today. If you test Facebook retargeting for incrementality, you will see an impact between 1% and 5% maybe. If you run Amazon campaigns, it's also a very low incremental factor because you are visible already in the organic rankings. And I guess just doing the pure bidding based on the assumption that it's incremental is no longer a valid strategy going forward. You mentioned MTA versus incrementality measurement. Could you explain in more detail what the differences are, and also what the pros and cons of these kind of competing methods are?
Yeah, the first one is MTA, which is multi-touch attribution, and you could have many different ways of giving credit or different touches. You could have a model that gives credit to the introductory channel. You could have a model that gives credit to introductory and the converting channel, and everything in between is noise. You could have an equal weighted channel methodology to give credit, and you can get a little more supposedly scientific in how to give credit. And the reason I say supposedly scientific is most of the attribution partners that you see have some sort of a black box. And that actually is one of the downsides of attribution, is the marketing team that is actually driving or that is supposed to drive impact isn't as familiar with what's happening under the hood.
Let's dig a little bit into this, because actually we give credits with both methods, don't we? On the attribution side, we have that conversion happening, and let's say a click path 5 clicks, and then we model how to allocate the credits to the clicks. It could be could be bathtub, could be algorithmic, whatsoever, with time decay models and so on. And then we end up giving credits to the, let's say there were 5 different channels involved, and we give credits to these 5 channels. If we do incrementality testing, we go dark, at least in some parts, in all these channels, and then we derive incrementality coefficients. Could be whatever. On the search side, 90%, display retargeting only 2 to 3%, and this is how we kind of correct what we see in the numbers. What mechanism do you consider being more precise?
I think incrementality by far, in my experience, drives a significantly better outcome, because again, the approach that we all need to take as marketers, and oftentimes we're in our own organizations and in the industry, it's always about allocating the budget. I think we need to philosophically move away from allocating the budget and move toward creating the best outcome with the spend. And I think we all need to be champions for this cause, because it is, I believe, the right thing to do. And while I have an opinion of one, you can very methodically test this at your organization to truly try and understand what works and what doesn't work. I think some might say that the downside to running incrementality tests is the ongoing effort of trying to learn and trying to turn on marketing and then turn it off. But really, it might sometimes feel like a hamster wheel, but there is really no other way to truly understand what's driving the customer, because you can spend, and I'm going to use a channel for example's sakes, you can assume you're spending that $100,000 on Facebook a month and it's driving impact, but I would bet you that the impact on that $100,000 is very different with each vertical and different category of customers. So it absolutely works for some, but I would challenge if it does for others.
So, what would you recommend companies who, I mean, there's organizational pressure, political issues, and we oftentimes hear, oh yeah, but that's too costly. So we have strong growth ambitions, and there's no way we're going to cut off our ads. How do we overcome this?
Have you? So it's funny. There's this old, I read this somewhere where there's two people in an organization talking, and one says, if we train our employees, what happens if they leave? Like, should we train our employees? Because if we train them, what if they leave? And then the other person saying, but what if you don't train them and they stay? It's kind of similar to that in education for marketing, where it's very important to challenge the status quo. We cannot move forward in performance marketing and overall marketing impact and marketing strategy if we don't continue to challenge the status quo and truly try and understand what works and what doesn't. And for any young marketer out there or up and coming marketer out there, I would encourage you to find a champion in your organization or multiple champions that help you further the cause to challenge someone's way of doing things that just because it's been done forever. I think the whole it's been done forever and this is how we do things does not work. And you will find very, very surprising things the minute you try something new that's never been tried before. Some of them will fail, some of them will do exceptionally well, but the key is to continue to learn. And if you don't try new things, you will never learn.
What you're saying is basically the advantages or benefits of cutting some spend off and making sure that you act based on true, real, tangible results is overcompensating the loss of traffic.
Absolutely, it does. And that's what in some cases, you'll see how surprisingly well some channels do as comparison to others, but it's very specific to your vertical, to your industry, and to what you do. So what works in one place doesn't necessarily work in another place. And I'd really challenge and ask the question, why?
Let's still, I mean, you don't have to convince me. I'm already convinced, but let's still challenge this a little bit and play mind games, and maybe we involve our audience here a little bit. My question is, who is remembering ads from his or her childhood? Ujjwal, do you?
I probably remember a couple of
TV ads. I'm talking about TV ads, like whatever you saw when you were a kid, you saw on TV. Do you remember something?
Sure, I remember a couple of them.
Yeah. So if you still remember these TV ads, there seems to be a very, very long afterburn effect. And if I try to rationalize this a little bit, it's probably the more emotional advertising is, the more emotionally engaging it is, the longer we will remember it and the longer this long-term impact is. Now we run an incrementality test, let's say 6 weeks. How can we give credit to these things?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult sometimes to create long-term tests. And it's very difficult to also have the patience because sometimes we also want to move on to the next thing and move really fast. But the one thing that comes to mind is a test I ran a long time ago at an organization I was at, where we actually planned a direct mail test and we ran it for a year straight, where we divided our customers into different cohorts and changed the cadence at which we messaged them. And a set of customers was getting.
What channels did you test?
It was direct mail combined with email. So okay. It was a combination of CRM channels, direct mail and email specifically. And we messaged customers with a direct mail piece once a month, once every other month, once a quarter, and twice a year in 4 different cohorts and 1 control group that got absolutely nothing. To truly understand, because at the time we were spending a lot of money on direct mail, and that we had to optimize that. And the learnings was actually phenomenal, where the decay of advertising in a short period of time is almost negligible. But as time goes on, the decay almost widens, and you see that the control group performs poorer and the test group performs higher, because top of mind is top of, like you just remember the brand. But I guess going back to your question, there is no easy answer. It requires a lot of planning, it requires a lot of thought, and it requires a lot of testing. You have to go through the pain to enjoy the rewards on the other side.
So I think what the conclusion we can draw from this is that incrementality tests, short incrementality tests, have a tendency to underestimate the impact, and to what extent you underestimate the impact probably has something to do for how long you remember what you did. And let's play this with Google PLA. Most people already tomorrow won't remember that they clicked today on an ad, because it's transactional by nature. It's like navigating over the site and you click, but you don't really think about it. Same with text ads. I mean, you know all that stuff. We've optimized ad copy for ages, and then you realize it's just, you put the keywords in, it's gonna appear in bold letters. People tend to click on the ads. Do they actually read the entire ad? Probably not. So would you agree that to my hypothesis, which is unproven, that the more emotionally engaging something is, the longer you have to run the tests, or the bigger the more you underreport the immediate impact if you run a short test?
Yeah, I would agree with the thesis, and there is some evidence with the testing that many organizations, I'm sure, have done, but we've done as well. And the test that I was referring to, obviously at the time we had an offer for that audience, but there's a simple test you can do where you hold out an email audience and you don't send them anything. And the audience that gets your emails, you send them brand information and why your business and what makes you unique. It's not really about the offer, but it can be emotional content, and that emotional content can be served across many different addressable media channels. And you'll see we have seen, at least I have seen, that the impact is absolutely very visible, and the longer term you run it, the longer or the wider the impact is between the control and the test.
Let's tackle a topic you had mentioned in our prep call. What you seem to constantly do is watch the direct type in traffic and analyze what the new customer rate of this direct traffic actually is. Can you explain a little bit why
Yeah, sure.
and
so,
what conclusions you draw?
Yeah, I think one of the things, when you measure your brand strength, and the Airbnb article you referenced mentioned brand strength a little bit, and the brand marketing side. When you measure brand strength, there's a few ways to measure brand strength. You can obviously look at the NPS score. You can look at your reviews to understand what customers are saying about you. I think one of the very good measures in brand strength is to understand how many customers and how many visitors are coming to you directly without you spending any money to bring them back. So to your whole point about emotional advertising and connecting with a customer, one of the measures are the ability to connect lifetime value to different channels and different performance marketing mechanisms is actually key to truly understanding the level of CAC you can spend on every customer, because a channel that drives a customer to go back to a direct source or to a brand keyword is a far more profitable customer. And what Andy, you and I were discussing is one of the ways I think brands can measure their brand strength is the growth of their brand keywords as a percentage of their overall traffic. But when I say brand keywords, it could be direct, it could be organic, it could be brand keywords. a combination of those three and how that's increasing an influence to drive your existing customers back, and not just existing, but new customers back. Because if you're getting a new customer to come in through brand keywords, they didn't know about your brand and something prompted them to search for you. So what is it that prompted them to search for you is a question to ask, but also, is your percentage of new customers coming from brand keywords consistent and growing?
Understood. Imagine you found your own e-commerce business and you want to get marketing right. What would you do? Would you buy a traditional attribution system? Would you do incrementality testing? Would you set up both, like have an attribution system in place and do incrementality testing?
Yeah, I think what attribution has taught me over time is to understand the goals and the role for each channel. And what I mean by that is every channel serves a purpose and they have a standing in the funnel or the journey, the traditional funnel, where some influence new customers to find you. But in general, I don't have full appreciation, or I don't fully agree with attribution as a methodology to spend your dollars. I think attribution is more of, the way to think about it is maybe attribution is the output. It's not really the input. So when you think about, or if I had my own business and I had to devise a plan to spend the money, incrementality testing is the input and attribution is the output. So attribution is almost, how are we going to count the money? It's not helping you create the money or create the dollars. All it's helping you do is count the money a little bit, but that too in a way that is not the best way to reinvest those dollars into new initiatives. I think I would go probably 100% down the incrementality testing route and very, very little. The only thing attribution is worth is understanding the role and goal of a channel. For example, I've seen in many lives that Google and other paid mechanisms that are similar drive top of the funnel new customers, but it's a known thing that email drives under the funnel or bottom of the funnel, and it's all about your existing customers. So with that caveat, you assess how each channel is meant to do what it's doing, and then question, is it doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Let's get a little bit more tactical. We have attendees who probably run their own marketing campaigns across a multitude of channels. What practical advice could you give? How would you tackle the problem? Let's assume someone hasn't done any incrementality testing yet. What's the starting point? What's the plan? How would you implement it?
I think it's the easiest way to think about it is where are you spending your most time, effort, and dollars? So if you haven't done any incrementality testing, I would say take the 3 areas where you're spending the most amount of money and then make dramatic changes to those spend buckets. And you can do it by top channels, or you can also do it by place in the funnel. You can take 2 or 3 channels that are very focused on one part of the funnel and change your spend out there. And I mentioned something earlier about going from first gear to fifth gear. You really need to make a dramatic change. If you're spending $1,000 a day, spending $1,200 a day is not going to change anything. Or if you're spending $10,000, going to $12,000 isn't going to change it. To create material outcomes, that $10,000 or $20,000 a day or whatever it is needs to go to, and I would say the 2x approach or the half x approach, where you really need to go to fifth gear, or you need to slow down to see if you have a material impact.
What about taking geolocations and going dark in just a few locations?
Absolutely. And if you have a store base, you can also see the impact of stores by going dark in a few locations in addition to the web.
Have you guys tested store incrementality?
We do test store incrementality all the time. I can't share any numbers, but we absolutely do test incrementality in all things we do from a marketing perspective. And on-off is not just an approach for the web. Incrementality testing is not just an approach for the web. It is an approach to manage your customer's life cycle. And managing your customer's life cycle happens omni-channel.
How frequently would you advise to test? Is it
it's like
half year?
Yeah, I think you'll never stop testing, but a test that works today or does not work today, I would revisit that thesis in 6 months. Because my perception is that, especially now with my macro, maybe a year and a half ago, I would have said test it every year. But now I would say it's probably every 3 to 6 months, because the macroeconomic changes that we are seeing are pretty large, and I don't see them slowing down.
Let's shift gears a little bit, but stay in measurement. There's another huge shift currently going on. It took ages, but it's now happening. It's also being driven by Google to a great extent, which is that previously companies had relied on ROAS and revenue as target KPIs. And we now see the smartest guys in the market to rather focus on CLV. What are the downsides of this old ROAS-based approach, and where do you see the upsides when focusing on CLV?
I think ROAS is basically attribution. ROAS is correlation and ROAS is attribution, where it is an old school way of understanding what drove impact, but it isn't the best way and the truest way of understanding if the impact was in fact driven by what we did. ROAS assumes that there was impact in everything we did, because everything gets credit, and it's the classic revenue divided by spend.
And if you leave the attribution problem out, I can still, let's say, make 100K in revenue and sell only to existing customers, and the same 100K revenue to new customers. That's probably not the same, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the first thing to ROAS is to add the word I in addition to it. And
incremental, you mean with that,
yeah,
right?
Incremental. So add incremental ROAS to anything. And one of the things I did in a very old, in one of my lives many years ago, we were seeing, and I'm making up the numbers, we were seeing a specific channel drive 40% new customers. And the argument or debate was, this channel is driving 40% new customers. It's not a profitable channel, but we make money on the lifetime value, and it's driving 40% new customers. So why not continue? And the fact back then was that every single channel, or the average for the business, was a 40% new to customer acquisition rate. So it's not like that channel was driving a materially different outcome. I think you can add the word incremental to literally every metric you're looking at. And as much as it is about the incremental ROAS, it is about the incremental new customer, it is about the incremental margin, it is about the incremental lifetime value that you're driving for your brand based on a set of actions or a set of initiatives you're taking for the customer. But a combination of many things, and I mentioned incrementality, which becomes the foundation layer. And on top of that, you have new to file, gross margin, lifetime value. And three of these are very, very important to fully understand. And then these are kind of the inputs, and the outcome or the output of the equation is the long-term brand impact.
And why are most companies focusing on a short-term KPI, which doesn't include margins, returns, and anything, if the overall company strategy is usually geared towards growth and sustainable growth, like you take the individual customer value into account, and this is even something how we value companies. What's the reason, in your opinion, why marketing is kind of lagging behind while the whole company strategy is already years ahead?
I think we need to, as marketers, challenge that and change that. Why that's happening is sometimes there's, and Andy, you and I have discussed this, but sometimes there's organizational pressure. Sometimes there is the mindset that you need to allocate the budget. And we need to move and change that mindset from allocating the budget to understanding why we're allocating the budget, and understanding where we allocate the budget, and understanding if we need to allocate the budget. So there's absolutely sometimes organizational pressure to allocate the budget. Other times it's difficult to let go of how you've been doing things for a long time. And there is no easy way, but this is almost an opportunity for someone that's willing to stick their neck out and take a chance and challenge the old and come up with the new, because you can try and this is my perspective, you can try and go with the way things have always been done, but the tide's shifting, and everyone is going to be talking about incrementality. So it really could be an opportunity for someone, but it's also a downside if you don't do anything about it and you continue to do things the way you've always done them.
Let's hop to a test we did, and let me first describe what happened here and explain the outcome, and then I would ask you to explain a little bit what you think is going on under the hood and why this is actually working. Background is that many people perceive bidding systems as kind of static. So they feel, okay, it's TROAS optimizes against ROAS. So let me explain a little bit what we did here. It's one of a multitude of tests we've done in the recent time. And we see very, very consistent results. So what we had here, so first of all, we implemented a geo split test. So we found correlating geographies, and then a test and a control. Test campaign had target KPI, plain revenue, ROAS, classic model, and the control in orange had a different target KPI. So we started pulling margin data, return data, and also new customer data, CLV data into the bidding, and kind of manipulated the data input through the tracking. So it came directly into the bidding, and then we let the bidding run. What we can see here is that while the test campaign spent 19% less, we roughly achieved the same revenue here. However, you see a considerable jump on the margin side, which was higher at even a 19% lower spend. And then where the magic happens is on the new customer side, 59% up, 49% up. How do you explain such a dramatic different picture?
Yeah, and Andy, just to confirm, there was an input into the engine, right, out here of the data that was being passed back in.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's actually the easiest answer is that the input you create for the engine determines the output that you get from the engine, and obviously you need to have the numbers. Or all of these numbers where many businesses might not have easily available on a customer level, the margin, whether it's a new or existing customers or the lifetime value. I would say even if businesses can start with one or two of these instead of all three, it's a starting point versus chasing nothing, but the input is really what drives the output. And the fundamental basic thesis is that you can use your basic transactional information to feed it back to the engine to create an advantage for yourself. The last thing I'd mention is the engine. It's not a black box. Sounds like it sounds like it's more of the machine is only as smart as the humans interacting with it and the information that's being fed. So it's not rocket science, but if you feed the engine the right information, it's going to do its job.
So basically, what you're saying, it's all about kind of predicting, estimating what the value of the different clicks which happen is, and then just close your eyes, let the AI do, but control the data input, basically, which means you're steering the system. You make it, you basically make it see.
Yeah, and then our job as marketers is, after we provide the right input, the right direction, and the right strategy, to keep measuring and take out our compass every week, or take out whatever measuring systems we have, to make sure we're navigating in the right direction.
Although you said it in between the lines, to finish this webinar with my last question, let's talk a little bit about organizational change, because it seems that we are in the midst of a huge paradigm shift where in the past we've been quite operational and drove efficiency based on numbers we got back from the platforms, from Google, from Facebook and the likes, based on just plain revenue data without seeing through customer lifetime value. And now this whole game has started to change and becomes way more strategic. And I see lots of companies spending a good $100 million in the old school way. No incrementality, no margins, no returns, no new customers, and they just play that old game. What do these companies have to do in order to start playing the new game?
I think if you're at one of those companies, you have the biggest opportunity for the rest of your life today. Because if you're in an organization that does exactly what you described, where you're spending $100 million or 50 or $20 million, and you're not measuring the margins and the new customers and the lifetime value, if you can steer and find a champion to help you achieve that, and start small, you don't need to get all the fields in one day. Start with new versus existing customers and pivot your spend towards new customers. Then add margin to it, then add lifetime value to it. But build a case to do this. Find a champion on the exec team, find a champion in your leadership who truly understands the why in addition to the what. And if you're young and if you're ambitious, it actually is a pretty immense opportunity for you.
So this was a very, very inspiring final statement. So for everyone out there, in my opinion, this is going to happen anyway. So there are two options. You drive it, innovate, and make this happen, or you wait 1-2 more years and it's going to pushed on you. And that's a great opportunity for the young and smart rookies to actually hop onto this new game and just be ahead of the curve. And with this, we have a point landing. It's 1:44 Eastern time. I would now open the questions and hand back to Mark. Ujjwal, thanks a lot for this great share.
Hi, guys. We actually received a couple of questions from the audience, but there was one that I thought of that I wanted to ask. It was just really related to the last question that came in, which was a little bit focused on folks who are just getting started out. But I'm curious, Ujjwal, Andy, are you seeing a change in the way that the public markets are valuing retailers? So much of the public market is about, we got to get revenue growth now. We have to show immediate growth, but a lot of what you guys talked about in terms of driving valuation of retailers talks a little bit more about longer term. Are you seeing a shift where the public markets are starting to be a little bit more intelligent about this? Ujjwal, if you want to take a first stab at this one.
I definitely think as consumers get smarter, as investors get smarter about their investment decisions, there's absolutely more of a shift towards who's building a strategic roadmap versus who's just delivering for the quarter. So for sure, there is a shift towards that. I don't have a very strong point of view on if markets are fully evaluating and addressing the long-term value and the long-term platform that brands DTC retailers are creating, and the impact on an organization's valuation.
Great. Andy, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think there's also a paradigm shift going on, which is driven by specifically a single person who pushed this into the market and got really successful with this approach, which is Peter Fader. He kind of changed the way companies are being valued. In the very early days, let's think whatever, 2008, Zalando growing. This was mostly top line revenue growth. And the trick, if you want, was throw money at marketing and grow top line revenue, and looks great. These times are over. If you now talk to venture capitalists or private equity companies, they all look at cohorts from the past. They want to know, is this a sustainable business? And there are even new models right now where you can get loans, credits, and companies then again analyze cohorts. The question is, it's like Mark, if you want to get a loan, it's also how much money do you make and when are you going to be able to pay it back? Same thing with retail companies. The salary is coming through the repeat purchases, basically. That's the money which comes in, and that's a huge shift. And that's also one of the reasons why on the marketing side, it doesn't make sense to drive top line revenue with low margin products, high return rates, selling to existing customers. You have to bring the valuable new customers in, and that's why this change is happening.
So one of the things I wanted to add is that for sure, the market was valuing, or the VCs and private equity guys were valuing businesses, maybe not private equity, but more VCs were valuing a business based on growth maybe 10 years ago, and that's really shifted to valuing based on profitability and growth. So it's absolutely about profitability more than it is singularly about growth. And the thing that's great about that and the sophistication is the same VCs that are funding an e-com business or direct-to-consumer business or another business have actually already funded 4 other businesses and also funded 2 MarTech vendors. And in doing that, they're already aware of the level of sophistication that exists across the pond on the agency side and the client side and in other clients. And if you're not up to mark or up to speed in your thinking on measurement, they're going to easily call your bluff.
I like that answer quite a bit. Thanks. I'm going to ask a couple of the questions that were posted in the Q&A box. And by the way, we may have time to get some more questions. So if anybody else wants to post, I'll get to them if I can. This one was from early in the webinar. Stefan asked, and I'm going to abridge it just a little bit. Aren't Airbnb, eBay, and Adidas difficult examples to use when thinking about companies that can potentially quit their spend because they already have a long-term earned brand value? And I want to bridge the question just a little bit. What happens if you don't have that kind of brand equity in the marketplace? Are you still able to pull something like this off?
So I'm happy to take that, or at least start with it. I think for sure they have great brands that have been built over time. Maybe Airbnb is the newest of them all. It's become ubiquitous around the world, probably in the last 24 months than it was before that. But I'm going to tell you, having worked at brands that are both extremely small in the millions of dollars to brands that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars, the concept of incrementality and the concept of cutting back and the concept of truly measuring outcomes instead of allocating spend is not unique to these brands. And it's actually pretty much across the board. Every single organization I've worked at, we've been able to understand better the impact we're having on customers and create a more effective spend strategy based on that. So they do have the benefit of the long-term earned brand value that they've created, but you can do the same in other organizations that do not have as much brand value over as long a period of time.
I would agree to everything Ujjwal just said. The question is still valid. There will certainly be some correlation between brand equity, how popular a brand is, and the incremental impact. And we intuitively know if we have a new business which isn't known by anybody, of course, my incremental impact will be greater than having a large, well-known brand. But still, what we are not suggesting here that performance advertising doesn't pay off. The point we want to make is we need to have a different measurement approach in place, and we have to align our spend levels with a real impact. And also, to make an additional point here, it also does not mean that we end up spending less in advertising. What's going to happen is just that the budget will tend to move up the funnel, because these upper funnel activities, they looked really poor in these old times because all the last click tracking cut off the credits from these channels. And now with incrementality testing, if you go dark on an upper funnel channel, you might see an incremental impact of 150%. So there is more than what you see, because it's taking away some of the falsely allocated credits down the funnel. And it's just there will be a lot of movement. Doesn't mean that advertising doesn't work. That's definitely not the point we want to make.
Yep, great. I have time for one more question, and then I do have an announcement to make at the end. So I'm just going to ask you guys for a brief answer to this one. It's from James, and asks, is it fair to say that when pivoting to an incrementality-led approach, it's essential to secure support and partnership from the CFO's office and the team? For instance, taking them with you on the journey or having them be a part of your squad?
The more you involve and engage others in the organization, the better the outcome. I would absolutely say it needs to be an engaged process that's about cross-organization. And I don't know any CFO who would not be thrilled to hear about truly trying to understand the value of marketing and actually pulling back in certain cases.
From my experience, this is key to success. Oftentimes we see that on the operational levels, this is all understood already. There is awareness for the problems, but it's very hard because there are different departments all relying on old KPI sets. And if all of a sudden what you do, you run an incrementality test, and based upon the results you see, you start shifting your budget into some other channels, you will see half of the company whining about the lost revenues. The thing is, it's not lost revenues. They might never have been there, but it's really hard to get this through without the backing of someone highly influential and vocal, someone who's an advocate for this different approach.
You guys were quick enough that we actually have time for one more question. So I'm going to throw it out there and take the risk. This one just came in saying, if as a brand, we don't have a CDP in place and can't make that level investment, can we still leverage CLV insights at the customer level, or maybe just at the channel level?
I think you absolutely can. I always recommend this, and I've recommended this in the past as well. Wherever you are, because it's an anonymous attendee, find someone who's right out of grad school and has done a master's in statistics to help you understand the directional lifetime value of your customer. And that's not very difficult to do, at least the ballpark lifetime value. And you can do that by customer, you can do that by acquisition cohort, you can do that by channel. But you need some level of a buy-in from the organization to be able to do that, to fully create a business case on why you need a CDP. So it's almost walk and crawl before you run. And the walk and crawl approach that I always recommend is give someone a trailer or show them a teaser of what's to come if you're able to do this and get this successfully.
Yeah. Also, here I agree. let me give you some practical advice, whoever is this anonymous attendee. The light version, which is already much, much better than what you can do with a plain ROAS approach, is go into your CRM, analyze a cohort, and get a solid understanding what the average lifetime value is. And then if you track a conversion, you flag this conversion, whether it's coming from a new customer, new to file, or an existing one. And if it's a new one, you add this average new customer value, which will help to at least increase the new customer rate you're going to see. So the system will immediately react to this. If you want to take this further, what we do is we also take an export from the CRM file, and then we run a CLV prediction based on the individual basket. So if we predict that an individual customer is highly valuable, way more than average, we add this very high value. So this is just another step and a better refinement, but you actually don't need a CDP.
Great. Gentlemen, both of you, thank you so much for your contribution and the energy and your insights today. Especially thank you, Ujjwal. Appreciate you helping us out by joining today. It was really great insight. Yep.
Thank you, Ujjwal. Great.
One last announcement. In 2 weeks, on Wednesday, May 19th, we'll be hosting our next webinar. This one's going to be focused on retail media and site monetization. The whole title on this one is about retailers owning their own tech stack or using a third-party tech stack, why you should leverage your own monetization technology. Our guest there will be from Overstock, Jonathan Craner, who's the Senior Director of Co-op Advertising and Media Partnership. Everybody who's attending here, really hope we'll see you at the next one as well. It's bound to be as exciting as this one was today. Gentlemen, again, thank you both very much, and thanks to everyone who attended.